Most marketers are still following old playbooks written decades ago. The rules have changed, but the advice hasn't. Flipping the playbook is your license to rebel. This is your front row seat to finding out how leading CMOs are tearing up the old rules and building strategies that move the needle. If you're tired of being told that this is how it's done, let's flip the playbook together. Here's your host, Reza Mayandin.
Welcome to the show. How do you build commercially successful brands that create genuine emotional connections, especially in an increasingly commoditized market? My guest today, Lottie Norman. She's the Vice President of Brand Transformation and Strategy at the Travel Corporation. She's been there since 2018, looking after iconic travel brands like Contiki and now Trafalgar. She's right at the intersection of brand, performance, content, and culture. So she's definitely the right person to speak to. Lottie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Lovely to chat.
Lottie, is the travel industry as fun as it sounds to work in?
In a nutshell, yes. You get to discover new destinations. You get to help inspire people. And something I always say about the travel industry is my background, I came from agency side, and I used to work on all sorts of brands. And I always say to the teams I work with, one day I used to work on selling toothpaste and headache pills and things, and they have a role in this world. Let's not argue that. But with travel, it's probably the first job I've ever had where you truly know you're changing people's lives. And it's not a lofty statement. It's, really know, like travel truly changes people, and it's the memories that live with you. And I think, it's that age old saying, isn't it? Travel is the only thing that makes you richer. And I truly believe in that.
Yeah, no, that I do agree with you that they do change people's lives, and not just on people who travel, but also the destinations that they go to. And destinations can be explored, wealth can be generated, and also, the way people see a culture and generation that massively changes. So tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry, and especially from toothpaste to travel,
Yeah.
and your journey to a CMO and then a VP.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I started off, without revealing my age, I started off with big ambitions of being a journalist. So I studied journalism at university. I was a little bit obsessed with war reporting and sort of K80 days, and had envisaged myself on the war on the front line, much to my parents' sort of panic. And so I studied journalism at university. And then when I came out, it was kind of that sort of pivoting time where sort of print was starting to sort of become secondary to digital, and publishers were starting to build digital environments. I was fortunate enough to get a number of sort of placements in digital publications. And the story I always tell is I actually worked on OK magazine for my first year out of uni, which super, super fun. What really put me off journalism was really how formulaic a lot of those kind of publications were. So, they'd found a formula which won audiences, won eyeballs, got people talking. But, it became quite repetitive. So, I remember writing non-stop articles about Kerry Katona in the early 2000s, and for anyone who doesn't know, it was, she was in Asda campaigns and an ex-Atomic Kitten person. And, I realized, God, I need to change. I need to get out of this. So I took what I loved, and that was really sort of understanding what audiences like. And I think that's really a narrative that has stuck with me throughout my career, is sort of really understanding the human aspect of why people do certain things and what excites people and gets people talking. And so from there, I sort of won't go through the whole career saga, but did a stint in copywriting, worked for some big agencies, and I was even sort of involved when brands were starting to adopt social media, which again was very sort of baked in that kind of psychology, I guess, of brands. And you know, it moved quite quickly from a broadcast environment of let's just put stuff on these channels and it's another way of reaching people, to how do you add some sort of value. And so from there, I was actually offered a role, a year secondment in Australia. Picked up, obviously, my love of travel really kicked off then, and I spent a lot of time traveling around Australia, which, as a
I
born
feel
and bred
very,
Londoner,
very
what a
jealous.
lifestyle, hey? You know, I'd finish work, go to the beach, always be sat outside with a glass of wine. Yeah, it was amazing. And I was fortunate enough that whilst over there, I worked a lot in sort of content marketing and really helping brands identify the value of how to connect with audiences. And a lot of the clients I worked on, just by nature, happened to be travel related. So I did a lot of work for Qantas, a lot of work for Destination Tourist Boards, Tourism New South Wales. And then even sort of Surfing Australia, which is kind of tinged with, even though sports space, like tinged with this kind of attraction of the environment and bringing people together and community. And so, you know, after 8 years where I picked up this weird and wonderful accent where 50% of people think I'm Australian, 50% think that's wild to even say that.
I have got a weird accent, so don't worry about that at all. It's not weird, it's wonderful. That's what it
It's
is.
wonderful. That's what I say too. So yeah, then I moved back to London, um, and was fortunate enough to really be able to get into sort of tourist board life, and you know, understand sort of, as you said up front, the role sort of tourism and travel really bring to destinations. And then sort of from there, I got into the Travel Corporation, working predominantly on Kentucky at the time. What an amazing brand that is, you know, showing young people the world, and often people who have never been outside their countries. It's their first experience of new cultures and new destinations, and also, let's face it, the fun that travel brings with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so yeah, and then I've been in Travel Corporation the last 8 years and worked my way through, to last sort of 3 years I've been the CMO of an in-house marketing lab designed to sort of bring design and production and sort of strategy all together for the full touring brands, which was Trafalgar, Luxury Gold, Kentucky, and Insight Vacations. And then we got bought a couple of years ago by a big investment company. And obviously that brings with it a lot of growth opportunity and changes.
Yeah, of
And so
course.
this year, starting my new role as VP of Transformation for Trafalgar.
Wow,
Um, yeah,
amazing,
so that's
amazing.
kind of
Thank
the
you for
whistle
that
stop tour.
journey. I really appreciate it. Which brings me to a topic we wanted to speak about today, brand and performance. And it's really interesting how you touched on when papers used to repeat the same formula, and then social media sometimes do that, still do. And then even to this day, a lot of brands and companies treats brand and performance quite separate. And why do you think that still happens? And what problems does that cause when companies do that?
Yeah, look, it's an age-old dilemma, I think, for any marketer, but particularly if you've got sort of a passion for brand at the heart of sort of what you do. I think why we're in this stage, is because of measurement. Is the answer really? So performance is so easy to measure. You can say exactly what those dollars are doing, what they attribute, and how they, you know, add growth to the business. Brand is a lot trickier. You know, brand takes time. It plays a much different role. And I think, you know, we've got, and a lot of businesses have found themselves in this place where you keep investing, where, you know, it's really easily to measure. And the problem we've got is we've got quite lazy, I think, as marketers, of just focusing on kind of that performance funnel. And I think, you know, it's the short-term wins versus the long-term gains again. And, you know, really, we have to not see it as brand versus performance. It can't be one or the other, because what ultimately happens is, performance is brilliant at converting demand. And brand, in its purest sense, is brilliant at creating demand. And without one or the other, you really hit a stalemate. And I think that's what a lot of brands are starting to see now is, the biggest unlocks really come when you stop looking at things as either a brand campaign or a performance campaign. And, it really has to be end to end. And a lot of the time as well, you're talking to the same people. So it's easy to just focus on the people who know who you are and who are easy to convert. But I always say it's as much about the people who aren't in market as it is about the people who are. And really, that's, you can't build teams just focused on one or the other. They have to go hand in hand. And I think businesses are really waking up to it. But the measurement is a key thing and the key issue, which will remains, I think, for a while.
It's yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And you mentioned something about brand building, and it takes a long time.
Mm.
And there really needs to be an intent behind it. And if it's not done right, also it can confuses the audience. And it goes back to the point that you mentioned. You really learned how to understand the audience when you were writing. And it kind of leans to the side of like you're telling me brand building is like a storytelling with a commercial intent. And what does that mean in practice to you? What does it look like in reality when you do that?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the travel industry, it's an interesting one. I mean, up front, it is super fun. It's a great industry. Sort of who wouldn't want to travel the world for a living? But given what we do and what we sell, it's travel's kind of become brutally commoditized, is what I'd say. Everyone, if you look at a lot of travel brands, everyone does the same thing. Ironically, everyone shows the same type of visuals. They promise the same things, the buzz term of authentic experiences. And, I think the danger, if you don't address that, is how do you become distinctive? How do you become louder? But you have to stand for something. You have to know what is in your DNA and, what makes you different. Because, one of the biggest things I always say is it's very easy to kind of get your head turned at the latest channel, the latest opportunity, the latest trend. But what do you stand for as a brand, and how do you build a story and a narrative around that that's consistent as well? So, I always say to my team, a lot of it's our reputation is repetition. So, how do we repeat something so much that you hear it and you're like, that's Trafalgar? It's the human brand. We only use real people in our content. How do you own something and then build brand storytelling around it and keep doing it? It can't be a one and done, I think, is the other thing. A lot of brands really fall down on is, they do one really cool campaign and then they walk away and go back to their performance marketing. And it needs to be consistent for all channels.
Can you give me an example of what's worked really, really well across either Trafalgar or any other
Yeah.
brand that you worked with?
Yeah. Do you know what? It's probably, let's talk about Kentucky in the youth space because youth marketing is an interesting one in that it's ever changing. When I started, we were talking to millennials. Now, the scary fact is it's like Gen Alpha. We're starting to prep that generation of, who
You're
aren't
scaring
booking
me.
yet. I know it's scary. It's very scary. Um, and this audience has totally grown up in a different way to anyone else, and their expectations are different. And so they're savvy to what's right and what's not. So, everyone says it's authenticity, it's about being genuine. But what does that really mean? And I think, that's an interesting space for us with Kentucky was, they were wise to it. They weren't enjoying brands in the same way. They were becoming a lot more fickle to brands because they were in environments they were just consuming so much. And there's all this research of they've got shorter attention spans. How do you get the talkability? But what it really came down to was getting into their communities, getting into where they were, but with something meaningful. And so probably one of the most successful, it's definitely not the sexiest thing we've done, but was really build a creator network
Okay.
of people who became true Kentucky ambassadors, who would travel with us regularly, who would talk about us regularly, but who truly believed in the product. You know, these weren't sort of your pay to share type people. These were people who really became part of the brand. And what we chose to do is actually not work with travel influencers or creators, only instead work with people in different sort of verticals. So, music, fashion, technology, you know, people who had different audiences we could reach and sort of start to talk from a community mindset. And I think, you know, that then infiltrated so much of our sexier campaign work. You know, we did a travel experiment where we gave a selection of these ambassadors headsets to wear on Kentucky trips, and we measured their brainwaves of like actually, you know, how much does that day one and day one nerves of meeting new people, and what does that do to your brainwaves?
Wow.
And then like jumping off, you know, bungee jumping in New Zealand, like what does that do to your serotonin levels? And you know, but again, it allowed, I guess, having that creator network allowed us to just build on the regular voices as opposed to just being an out there campaign.
Wow, no, I'd like to see one of those videos actually and just like see
Oh
my brainwaves. That would be amazing.
yeah,
That's
and
like a scroll factor, that.
it is. And do you know what? What was really interesting is, you know, we can now make the claim of, you know, doing a Kentucky at scientifically is proven to, you know, make you happier. But the nature of doing things together, and I guess as humans experiencing things together, how much bigger your sort of your brain waves and your reactions were by this notion of kind of shared travel and sort of experiencing things with someone else. And like the laughter levels were higher, the smiles were higher, the, you know, those moments and that sort of love factor as well. So yeah, it's super interesting putting some science to it.
Fascinating, fascinating. Now moving forward, you've come to a role as a VP of brand transformation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the transformation is that you're leading at the moment?
Yeah, I can. I guess so Trafalgar, for anyone who doesn't know Trafalgar, Trafalgar is I guess like the mother brand in our portfolio. It is you know, it's been around a very long time. It has a huge amount of heritage and legacy behind it. And it's been really focused on kind of this land touring space. Predominantly brings a lot of Americans into Europe. Sort of, you know, there's nuances around that, but sort of at its heart, that's what it does. Um, and so Trafalgar is a really interesting model of how do you evolve a legacy brand and a heritage brand. And the people who love Trafalgar are huge brand fans. You know, these guys, they set up their own Facebook groups to talk about it and share what's happening in the business. They're not paid, they're not asked to do this. These are people who do, you know, 5 or 6 trips a year.
Oh, wow.
They just love Trafalgar and they love it as a way of traveling as opposed to anything else. It's not just the brand, it's this notion of kind of guided travel. And so what we're trying to do is really tap into what makes Trafalgar special, but also future proof us for the next decade of travel. So, you know, the world is changing. There's sadly a lot of negativity and a lot of, you know, conflicts, whether it be economical situations and cost of living crisis, environmental issues and climate change, political issues, won't go there. You know, there's a lot of things which are impacting decision making at the moment. And I think what we're trying to do with Trafalgar is really deeply understand our audience, do a lot of customer research, and really simplify the brands to make it easier for people to understand what all of our tours do. For us to branch into new markets, we've just recently launched river cruising with
Mhm.
Trafalgar, which is a massive change for us. And
Different.
that's again born out of that, you know, that need for something else. And, you know, rivers having its moment at the moment, and, you know, there's a massive opportunity there. and future-proof it really, build new technologies, new ways of working, simplify how we talk about the brands, how they show up, and really sort of, build a new brand that has transformed for today's audience.
Okay. So what I'm hearing there is you've been a heritage-led brand and you had a heritage-led narrative, and it sounds like you're moving towards more of a behavior-led narrative, if I'm correct. What does that look like in reality?
Mhm.
And what does moving from heritage-led to behavior-led looks
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, I mean, we've never really spoken hugely about our heritage. I guess it's something we don't want to lose.
Hmm.
But we're becoming, I would say, as opposed to heritage-led to behavior-led, I'd say we're becoming from brand-led to consumer-led. And a lot of people say, and there's a lot of, in the marketing world, talk about being customer-centric and data-driven and everything else. Very few brands truly do that. And so what we're doing now is we're kind of taking a step back and looking at what does that mean for Trafalgar? How do we truly use data and use our audiences to build everything from how the brand looks and feels and shows up, how we communicate it, where we're talking, partnerships, all the sort of marketing stuff, but then right the way through to, what's that brand experience on our trips? What's the technology behind the brand to really simplify how people want to book now, how they want to engage? We've been very much focused to be a B2B kind of trade brand for a long time. So by that, I mean, we've sold a lot through travel agents. By no means is that stopping, but we're really accelerating, our technology around direct to consumer. So, how do we really improve all of that, and, meet the demand that we know today's customers want? So yeah, I'd say it's definitely more of a shift from being sort of brand centric and what we think and how we talk to being much more about listening and building products around, what people actually want. So yeah, I mean, it sounds simple. It's a
Oh,
massive task.
it's a huge task, and it makes me question how can a brand like Trafalgar evolve at that size without actually losing its soul,
Yeah.
and how do you actually achieve that on scale?
Look, that is the biggest challenge in all of this work. But I think it's the biggest commitment from the business, from the team. We have a hugely passionate team from our travel experiences team who build our trips and have the best job in the world. They build itineraries. Right the way through to our operations team and our tech teams. And I think we all know what the brand values are. And, you only have to experience one of a Trafalgar tour and see the magic. And you kind of then understand like that is so worth protecting. And I think, that's why we've got lots of checkpoints with this work. We're not going to just do it, put something shiny out. The mantra I keep sort of pushing is this is not a marketing exercise. This is a business transformation. And I think that's critical too. If it just lives in marketing and doesn't live through sort of all teams and the way we actually operate, then it just becomes, disingenuous and, falls over.
Okay. All right. No, that's incredible, and I think the audience always likes to hear how that works in
Yeah.
reality. And there's certainly an emotional connection here when you're talking about the brands,
Mm,
especially now that we are in a category that has, you mentioned the word over commoditized.
mm.
How do you inspire that change, and how do you inspire that emotional connection as you're moving? How do you achieve that?
Yeah. Look, I think two things. I think storytelling is so critical. Sorry, my cat has decided to join us. Um, it's not a call, it's not a podcast without
Your cat's on the journey.
he's on the journey. He's the real star. Yeah, I would say it is very much, brand storytelling for sure. Really understanding your audiences and making sure what you're offering is baked in value. So, what we've identified, and I think anyone in the travel category will be aware of, is future travelers are kind of voting with their wallets for the brands that they feel have values. And sort of what I mean by that is we do have so many factors contributing, like people don't have the money at the moment, and if you're investing in a travel experience, you want to know you're actually getting something for it. It's a massive gamble, it's a massive investment. They're making decisions based on trust and what else they'll get aside from just visiting a destination and seeing a few tick box exercises and doing a few things of I've got to see the Eiffel Tower. It's what else can they do, what's the values that play in, how do they better themselves, or are they resetting, are they reconnecting with destinations? And I think they're much more intentional. They're taking fewer trips, but they're taking better ones. And so I think maintaining that and not being just about one more trip mentality or being just so focused on price. Travel isn't that purchase where it is just about the price, it's about so many other things. And I think that's what brings back to kind of what you as a brand stand for and the DNA. There's higher expectations around the quality, the service, flexibility, and all of that needs to come across in sort of how brands are showing up.
Okay, right. And these behavioral shifts that you're seeing, is that across all travel audiences that you're seeing, or is that like the new Gen Alpha?
Yeah.
What are we seeing? What are you exploring at the moment?
Yeah, look, it varies definitely in different categories, but I think what we're seeing is this shift away from trends and behaviors being focused on an age range. It's less so. I read a great article the other day about silver surfers or people over 70s, and you know, that looks so different to what it used to. It's not about retirement anymore and, just disconnecting. It's about, learning new skills and resetting. And, being a 70-year-old today is very different to a 70-year-old 20 years ago. And so I think there's fundamental shifts across the whole landscape, which I'd say are consistent in every sort of demographic and behavior. I think the biggest thing is this frictionless need of people have a lot less patience,
Hmm.
and a lot more desire to, have a better experience. There's a lot more choice out there. And so I think, that's definitely something we're seeing. But
Okay.
then, even this idea of kind of disconnecting and resetting, and, we're seeing it in different ways. Our Gen Z audience for Kentucky, we just did a survey, and around 70% of them said that they would take a sober trip, which is wild to someone of my generation.
Oh yeah.
I like a glass of wine in the evening.
Millennia. There is so many posts around that, isn't it?
So many millennial. I'm so millennial. But that still shows up in sort of a millennial audience because it's more about disconnecting and wellness, not necessarily sober. So you see the same trends; they just materialize in different ways in different categories.
Okay, all right. And these behavioral changes, especially you said they don't have, they don't want to wait a long time. Who do you think what's leading that? Who's leading that change? Is this a post-pandemic reaction or something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic definitely contributed. I mean, we called it what was the industry buzz term? Revenge travel, was
Okay.
what sort of it was known as at the time. Of you coop people up and stop them traveling, and then it's like I can and I will, and I want to make the most of my time. And I think that's definitely shifted a mindset for sure as well. In that people want to make the most of now. And I think there's a few other contributing factors to that. As we touched on, the world is a bit of a messy place. And I think, this enjoying experiences, having a good time, connecting with your family, having time to be with other people, I think is kind of that motivator. And I think, as we said up at the very beginning, like travel is the only thing that makes you richer. It is something that connects people from all walks of life, all views, different opinions, different everything. And I think that is, it's the world today that is driving a lot of these changes.
Of course, of course. And you touched on something a little bit earlier around the value that
Mhm.
people are looking for, more of a value-based decision making that seems to be happening, and not just regarding to the monetary value, but other things.
Mm.
What does that mean for the travel industry, and what can other industries learn from that?
Yeah, look, I think we're in this state across all industries of, it's about experience culture and the experience economy more than anything. And I think, learning to, how do we make experiences or any sort of any product marketing, really looking at what the value is, what is that value exchange, and how how do you make it emotional? And I think one of the things which marketers often and myself over the years have been guilty of is you say about emotional marketing or emotional sort of prioritization, and everyone thinks it has to be really heavy. It has to be about these, deep and meaningful, and this travel experience is going to change your life, or this shampoo is going to make you feel a certain way. And I think, it's also about fun. If it makes you feel something, that's what a lot of brands need to remember. Just making an audience feel something in itself builds some sort of emotional connection. So it can just be laughter. It can be it could be fun. Um, just making people feel something around your product, I think, is just, such an underrated technique and sort of way of developing as well.
That's a very, very good point, and I think often now, as the industry and the internet has changed, sometimes that humor is going away as well. And it's a great touch point that you say, make people laugh again,
Yeah.
not just through a comedic value, but also through the brand itself. And
Mhm.
do you see a trend that we will move back into bringing those laughters back in the game and actually
Yeah.
being a little bit more playful with it in the marketing words, or are we being still very serious and clinically clean?
Look, I hope so. Is my personal hope. I think, there's a lot to be said for just making people smile. And that's an important role of brands when you look back to kind of advertising of the, the Mad Men eras and the 60s and everything else and beyond. There's a lot to feeling something, feeling good when you see advertising or marketing. And I think the worrying thing is everyone's a little bit scared of it. And I think, particularly amongst having worked in the youth space, the youth space is a scary place to play. Brands are getting cancelled left, right, and centre. People are scared to say the wrong thing. And I think, as brands start leaning in, back in on brand marketing, we will start to see people be a bit braver. I'd say the biggest advice is, look, just be honest, hold yourself true, be transparent. It's better to do something than not, but be accountable for it as well. So I think, we will start to see a shift. I don't think it'll be dramatic. I think the travel industry can be quite slow to the uptake there. See, Ryanair has done a great job the last few years,
And
social
they
media.
keep going at it. I mean, we've seen Ryanair going at it in the last few
The
weeks,
Elon Musk
and the
stuff,
whole
yeah,
industry. Yeah, I
exactly.
mean,
But look, we're talking about it, aren't we?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that there's a role. It's not for all brands. It's certainly, I don't foresee Trafalgar suddenly becoming the next Ryanair on social. But that humor is it can come out in many different ways. It's not necessarily the extremes of kind of the meme culture or the satire. It can also just be making people, a few witty puns, clever copy, that type of thing. I think I saw an amazing one yesterday of on the beach, and how they did a really reactive post to the whole Beckham family saga.
Wow.
And they had a Brooklyn ticket. It was an out of home poster, and they had a Brooklyn ticket, and it was ripped in the middle. And their offer was, "Don't worry, family feuds happen." And and they were like free cancellations for families, and it was just brilliant
Well,
timely.
that is amazing. Which comes to trends, talking about the Beckhams and everything else around the
Yeah.
family feud. What are the trends are you seeing at the moment in the travel industry, and when it comes to specifically supporting with the marketing side?
Yeah, look, the biggest trend, and I don't even like calling it a trend because I think it's here to stay, is, really utilizing real content and real people. We've definitely seen a shift away from the glossy influencers of yesterday. For us personally, the content which works the best through our media mixes and our social is the really authentic, genuine stuff of real people, real trips, experiencing what we do and having fun. And I think that will continue as we sort of really lean in on trust as well, and trying to build trust with an audience. I think that's not going to change. I think, look, there's lots of trends in terms of destinations and destinations which come up in popularity. Last year was very much the year of Japan. I feel like everyone was in Japan. That we've had sort of,
I know three
the
people who went to Japan and came back. I still haven't been.
I've never been, not one I've done. Destination dupes, as we call it, these kind of secondary destinations, which are a bit more off the beaten track than the hero destination. We've seen, instead of people going to like Porto, going to Lisbon, going to Albania has really sort of turned up as the new French Riviera. We're seeing lots more of that type of thing, I think.
Okay, all right. And what kind of travel experiences are travelers voting for with their wallets now? What do you see people are really willing to spend their money on?
Like off the beaten track for sure is definitely something a bit different. We're definitely seeing, that. I would say wellness goes without saying. I think it says a lot about all of our kind of mental health at the moment, and just life in general, that people are really investing in things which like really help them relax. Lots more sort of active walking tours and trips and experiences. In the youth space, kind of soft adventure is really having its moment of, people being active and getting outside and wanting to do more. I think we're much healthier as a global population than sort of previous years.
100%. I mean, it's really strange. I did a study actually on High Rocks. We were talking about active population, and this this last year, High Rocks had more search volume than going to festivals in the UK, which
Wow.
was very, very fascinating. So yeah, I do resonate
Yeah.
with you saying active
Yeah.
holidays are definitely a thing. I am really, really sorry. We're getting to the end of the podcast, and I've got a couple of more minutes, and I have a burning question for you. If there was one lesson you would like the listeners to take away with them today from the conversations we've had, what would it be?
Look, I've been asked this question a lot over the years, and I think like it's not that revolutionary, but it's take a chance and do it. And I think particularly in marketing, we can overthink things. There's so many reasons why you shouldn't do something. Whether it is, will it make enough money? Is it gonna actually land? Are people gonna care? Shall we launch this trip? Shall we not? 9 times out of 10, just taking a punt and going with it and not overthinking, I think is worth so much more. And I think, we often don't take that time to take a step back of the things we didn't do. Um, So yeah, I mean, it's not a huge one, but I think definitely that's one of always my answer really is really, back yourself. Think about the audience. What do they actually want? What value will this deliver? Whether it's a campaign, a product, a way of working, a team hire, whatever it is, what's the value? And back it, take a gamble. I think that's what we've seen over the years. The brands that actually stand up and do stuff and think outside the box are often the ones that win.
Thank you so much, Lottie. VP of Brand Transformation and Strategy at the Travel Company Corporation. Thank you for flipping the playbook with us today. Appreciate
No
it.
worries. Thank you.
If you like to find details of Lottie, it'll be in the show notes. You can explore that. And if you've enjoyed listening to us, please share it with friends and family and colleagues that might be interested, and give us a follow and subscribe. Thank you again, Lottie, for the show today.
No worries. Good chatting.
Flipping the Playbook is produced by SALT.agency. We don't just optimize for search and AI. We optimize for business growth across SEO content and digital PR. Check out our links in the show notes. Thanks for listening.